Up next, the story involving some of the world's most powerful people and trillions in hidden assets. Jordan King Abdullah and former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair, musicians Elton John, Ringo Starr, and Shakira, Vladimir Putin's former mistress, with whom he's rumored to share a daughter, are among hundreds of world leaders, celebrities, and other richest of the rich who've been using offshore financial services, incognito bank accounts, and shell companies around the world and here in the U.S. to hide their money. As a result, they pay little to no taxes, and it appears most, if not all, of the money stashing is legal. The revelations are laid out in the Pandora Papers, the result of a 2-year investigation into nearly 12 million confidential financial documents that were leaked to the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists and then analyzed by hundreds in 117 countries, including PBS's Frontline, which is out with a new documentary on that very subject.
We're talking about people who have been in all kinds of trouble, accused of some very bad things, who are using this system to hide their wealth, not only potentially from the governments and the taxing authorities in their home countries, but also from the victims in their home countries who might have a claim to some of that money.
Pandora Papers premieres tomorrow night. I'm joined now by the producer, Evan Williams, and International Consortium of Investigative Journalists reporter, Will Fitzgibbon. Will, Evan, congratulations and thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Will, can I start with you? I want to make sure I didn't make a mistake to begin with. While these people, some of them, may have broken laws in terms of how they made their money, for the most part, if not totally, they are not breaking laws in how they are hiding their money. Is that correct?
I think the short answer at this stage really is we don't know and we can't say. I mean, these 12 million records that we have and that you talked about don't, in many occasions, explicitly say whether or not something's illegal or not. You know, politicians and criminals these days, they're not stupid enough to write in an email, please hide my looted wealth. But what we do know from this secretive offshore world is that very often governments learn about their own citizens from the documents that we at ICIJ and Frontline publish. And that means in months or years' time, I wouldn't be surprised at all if we saw court cases emerging from this.
Evan, you profile in the film a couple of people, in particular the King of Jordan, and I don't even know how to describe her, an intimate friend, as I mentioned, of Vladimir Putin. Could we start with her for a second, and can you share her story?
Sure. Svetlana Krivonigic started as a cleaner in St. Petersburg. And what's really interesting is this story, it very much reveals how these investigations work. So just about the time that the ICIJ, Will and his team were sharing these documents with other journalists around the world, Russian investigative website published an investigation into Svetlana Krivonigic saying that she had gone from cleaner to becoming one of Russia's richest women shortly after a reported or an alleged affair with President Vladimir Putin and reportedly having his child, his daughter. And then one of the journalists from the British Guardian newspaper entered her name into the database that the ICIJ had put up, and they found her name. And basically the documents showed that she was the secret owner of a shell company, and that shell company owned an apartment in Monaco, and then they put two and two together, and then you've got the story. So Svetlana Krivonigic, shortly after having President Putin's alleged child, ends up with a very nice apartment in Monaco. And that's very much how these investigations work.
Very moving rags to riches story, I should say. Here's Luke Harding, by the way, speaking of Monaco and some of Putin's friends, speaking about this very issue.
What's happening is that Putin and his friends, his kind of inner circle, particularly friends from St. Petersburg, have become extremely rich, mainly on the back of state resources, oil, gas, things like that. And that they've created these colossal offshore structures where their assets are being hidden, and also that it's being done with help from the West.
Will, what does help from the West mean exactly?
What it really means is that criminals and oligarchs and anyone who you might, you know, in your imagination, imagine running off to a palm-fringed tax haven with a suitcase of cash, doesn't do it alone. Every step of the way, and we see this in intricate detail in the Pandora Papers, is helped by Western professionals, often wearing a tie or a nice shirt, you know, in London, in New York City, in Zurich, in Amsterdam, for example. And I think the Pandora Papers really punches through that old and maybe lazy narrative of criminality just being done by the criminal. It takes a lot of people to move millions, let alone billions, from a country like Russia or Nigeria or Guatemala into a tax haven, be that tax haven Monaco or the United States of America.
And Will, I mentioned that you also talk about the King of Jordan, who's sort of Svetlana on steroids in terms of his, I don't know, you can't call them investments, whatever they are, his deposits in different parts of the world, yes?
Well, he's certainly beating Svetlana in terms of number of luxury properties. Through the Pandora Papers, we were able to see at least 11 luxury homes, including a trio of side-by-side mansions in Malibu, California, overlooking the ocean, that the King of Jordan had never disclosed publicly before. And again, like Evan had said in the case of the Russian, had bought these properties secretly through shell companies. What that means is that the public, not only curious journalists like Evan and myself, but citizens of his own country would never have known about his $106 million property empire if it wasn't for these leaked records.
You know, Evan, virtually everybody I know, when these documents came out, the first thing we all asked is, where's Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk on the list? They're not there. What conclusions can we draw, if any, by those who are not part of the papers?
Well, the first thing I'd say is that I'm not casting any sort of aspersions on anybody, but I mean, there's 12 million documents, and this is very much still a live investigation. And I know, for example, that Will and the ICIJ and the Washington Post colleagues are still coming up with 2 or 3 very strong leads that will be coming out in months to come, as will Frontline, and we'll continue this. So this is just the beginning. This is a live trove of documents. We're not sure where it might go yet. But I'd say that what it does show is, that there are a lot of people, and Will found this out, a lot of political leaders. What seems to be really a hallmark of this one is the number of politicians and world leaders around the country using a system of secrecy to hide their wealth and assets and acquisitions. So that's really important. And I think, if we are expecting reform, we're probably not going to see it with the current political leaders that are there. There may well yet be other people to be revealed.
Will, from what I understand in terms of this project, you are Mr. South Dakota. Is that accurate? Is a fair way to describe you here? You know, when I started watching the film, I was so proud of myself that I knew about the Cayman Islands, I knew about the Bahamas, and I'm nodding like I know what I'm talking about. And all of a sudden, when I start hearing you guys talk about these trusts in South Dakota, can you flesh that out a little bit for us?
Yeah, certainly. Well, look, maybe I was Mr. South Dakota, but my reporting partner at the Washington Post, Debbie Sensiper, who you saw in the video at the start of this show, would definitely be Mrs. South Dakota in that regard.
Okay.
We worked side by side. But that was really one of the most fascinating and I think most important revelations of the Pandora Papers. For the first time, we had leaked documents that come from inside the United States. Now, for nerds out there who follow the world of offshore finance, they've heard rumors that South Dakota is a tax haven. It's a place that has very lax rules, incredibly tight secrecy, which means that anyone wishing to move millions or billions into the state is basically protected forever. But we've never had leaked documents to prove those rumors before. And for me, investigative journalism is often about moving from the realm of rumor to the concrete. And that's what we could do in the Pandora Papers. For the first time, we could say, here are these Brazilian billionaires. Here's a Colombian multimillionaire who the US government had accused of being involved in a money laundering ring years ago. These people in recent years have been moving away from places like the Cayman Islands because those tax havens have reformed themselves. And guess who hasn't reformed itself? South Dakota.
Well, what's the incentive for South Dakota to reform itself? Obviously, they'd lose a ton of dough.
Well, I think that's a real question that I don't have an answer to. I mean, there are governments around the world who've reacted to the Pandora Papers. Even today, as we tape this interview, the president of Chile is being impeached potentially in his home country. And yet the deathly silence of lawmakers in South Dakota as a response to the Pandora Papers is quite remarkable. There really isn't, at the moment, political pressure from what I can see for huge changes. I have heard rumors that South Dakota does feel a little bit disliked at the moment. They feel a little battered and bruised after the Pandora Papers, so there might be a few tweaks to legislation coming up. But I think the bigger question of why the United States has become one of the world's preeminent tax havens is not going away anytime soon.
I hope not. You know, Evan, we can end where we started with the reporter from the Washington Post beginning to explain, and I assume people watching this will say, why should I care about this? Other than the fact that the rich are getting away with murder, why should I care? Why does it matter to real people?
Oh, I think it matters hugely because the amount of money that's being funneled into this secret system is often from countries where that money is meant to be spent on the services and looking after their own citizens. These are people that are squirreling away tax money that should be paid in tax, number one. Number two, we don't know, and particularly the case in the United States. Debbie Senzip and Will make the point very strongly. This is just the beginning. This is like a very thin sort of tip of the iceberg. We don't know what we don't know in a funny way about who else is using this secret system. Are there drug runners? Are there terrorists? Are there dictators? And so there's a massive problem in the way that secrecy is being used to elicit the money from around the world into these trusts in places like South Dakota, because it seems like really they don't have the capacity to really drill down on the sources of that money and the type of people putting it in there, as we saw from the several examples in the film and in the reporting from Will and Debbie. So I think there are massive questions for us generally.
Let me just say, if people aren't enraged enough about the state of the world and want to get really enraged, watch this tomorrow night on PBS. You guys did great work, you and your colleagues. Thanks so much for your time tonight. I really appreciate it.